So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this first CRAE webinar of the new academic year. I'm Anna Remington, Director of CRAE, and it's wonderful to see so many names here, both familiar and some new ones. As you may already know, here at the Centre for Research in Autism and Education, we're a team of autistic and non-autistic staff and students based within the UCL Institute of Education and part of the Department of Psychology and Human Development. We aim to conduct high-quality, cutting-edge research, but also to ensure that the results of that research reach those who stand to benefit from them. The CRAE webinar series is one aspect of that, allowing people both within and beyond academia to hear from some of the key researchers, practitioners, and advocates in the field. Through everything that we do, we take a participatory approach, which means that we work with autistic people in all stages of the research and initiatives that we do, from the initial design right through to the sharing of outcomes. We hope that this means that the work we do is meaningful for the autistic community. At this point, I'd like to say a big thank you to all our funders, supporters, and team members who contribute to our work and make it all possible. In particular, a special thank you to Pears Foundation for their generous ongoing support that underpins everything that we do. Today, we're delighted to have the wonderful Sara King joining us. Sara is a doctoral researcher studying for her PhD at the Autism Centre for Education and Research, ACER, at the University of Birmingham. She's exploring autistic people's experiences of maternity services and maternity staff's understanding and experiences of supporting autistic people. She's autistic herself and has other autistic family members. She works as an autism trainer and specialist autism mentor and is committed to learning more about autistic people's experiences and to help improve services. Sara is one of the founding members and chair of the Maternity Autism Research Group, a collective of volunteers with the aim of improving the experiences of autistic people accessing services related to pregnancy and early parenting by signposting information and resources. Today, Sara will outline the background to her research and some headline findings so far. She'll also talk about MARG and the process that the collective has made so far. You're all very welcome to put questions for Sara in the Q&A box, and we'll ask her a few at the end. You can also post these anonymously if you prefer. And now I'm delighted to hand over to Sara.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that really warm welcome. And thank you everyone for coming. I'm really pleased to be here to be part of this series. So as Anna said, the content of today's session, I'm going to give you a bit of information about my background and my interest in this area and talk a little bit about my research so far. I'd like to talk about the Heuristic Inquiry approach that I've used for the research and talk a little bit about the Maternity Autism Research Group. So just a little bit about me. I didn't realise I was autistic until my mid-40s, and I had my diagnosis very late. Since then, other family members have realised they're autistic, and there are a number of them that are formally diagnosed or self-identified. Going through this process of realisation to diagnosis led me to reading lots all about autism. I read other autistic people's autobiographical material. I met with lots of other autistic people and spent time hearing their experience. And part of that, going through this process, which I think is fairly typical of people that receive their diagnosis late, of reconsidering and reframing life experiences through a new lens of being autistic. My profession previously was as a procurement and project manager, but I've now changed my work, and everything that I do now is in the field of autism. So I lead discussion groups for autistic adults. I work as a peer mentor and trainer, as Anna mentioned. So I'm hearing that autistic experience, personal experiences every day throughout my work. I'm mum to 2 boys. I had my children before I was aware I was autistic. My experience of parenting made much more sense in light of that realisation. I had good care and good pregnancies, but I did experience real challenges with things like actually being in the hospital environment, with sensory situations, sensory experiences, information and communication, and not feeling understood. I had delayed processing, and that transition into parenting and all of the huge life changes that go along with that impacted on my mental health for years afterwards. This led me to exploring this phenomenon in a postgraduate diploma project back in 2018, and then that developed into the PhD that I'm now doing. I wondered how other autistic people had experienced pregnancy, birth, and early parenting, and I'd heard anecdotal information, but at that point there was quite limited literature. There was a book by Lana Grant, and there were some research papers that had been published. My intention right from the start was to explore what improvements could be made. So what are the issues, and why is it important? There are health barriers identified for autistic people generally in terms of access to healthcare services, and the impact on physical and mental health in maternity services and within pregnancy has been identified too. Autistic adults are at higher risk of suicide, and autistic women may need different support in terms of sensory, social and communication. Autism in women and girls has not been understood so well until more recently, but awareness is increasing now, and services that have typically been for women may not have had the support and understanding that's necessary. People not knowing that they're autistic or perhaps being misdiagnosed can impact in maternity care situation. And there are lots of conditions that can co-occur with being autistic that can also impact in a maternity situation too. It's been identified that autistic people may need different support in relation to infant feeding, and also a need for practical, very specific support for autistic people accessing maternity services has been identified. There's also the potential for compound impact for individuals who may also have other autistic family members or other autistic children when they're going through the experience of maternity services, pregnancy and early parenting. So that just compounds that impact on them. And also we need to be thinking about autistic staff and how they're supported in the workplace. And of course, the importance of hearing the autistic voice in autism research has been identified too. So I just want to talk a little bit about my postgraduate diploma research. And this was back in 2018. Although this material is quite old, I'm sharing it because it's still really relevant today in the research that I'm doing now. So most of the respondents didn't disclose that they were autistic when using maternity services. And I should just say that this was the result of an online questionnaire with 15 responses to that. So it's a fairly small project, but these issues are still relevant, as I say. Some people hadn't had that diagnosis at the time, and others didn't give a reason, but some people did comment about the stigma of doing so and the potential risk of not being understood and autism not being understood. This impacted on how many people could ask for adjustments in services, and the majority hadn't. There was mixed feedback about whether disclosure would be helpful, with some concerns that staff might have had a lack of understanding of autism, which might have negatively impacted rather than helped. Others felt that disclosure was a good thing to obtain any help that might be needed, but clearly much needs to be done to help women feel confident, women and birthing people feel confident about disclosing and stating their needs and be supported when they do. The people that had disclosed said that staff involved didn't seem to understand the impact of being autistic or modify their approach. Anxiety and depression is something that affects many autistic people, and several respondents reported that and made suggestions about the kind of things that would have been helpful to help them manage that. People responded about the sensory difficulties they've experienced with lights, noise, being around other people, touch, and differences around pain thresholds and interoception. Many of the respondents commented that a private room would have helped them managing these issues and mentioned the need for a calm environment when attending appointments. There was another theme of a need for detailed information and control over their own care and their environment, several respondents commented on the need for specific, clear information to be communicated. That was a really important factor, to have that information in a very clear and concise way. There were many suggestions to improve care, and even though the respondents hadn't disclosed themselves, the feeling was that actually they felt that other people should, and to advocate for themselves, and there was a really strong message of the need for change and improvements in services. So just moving on to talk a little bit about the PhD, I was successful with securing funding from Autistic, who part funded the projects, and I'm part self-funding. And that was a process where potential projects were peer reviewed by autistic people. It's allowed me to compensate autistic participants for their time in phase 2 of the project, and also supported me with the fees for the PhD. I did invite 2 autistic parents to sense check the documentation for me, and the funding enabled me to support that too. And I piloted the materials and the process for phase 2 of the PhD, which is autistic people's experience with an autistic participant, and I really valued the insight from that too. So the PhD structure itself, I initially carried out freedom of information requests. I did that quite early on in the PhD, and at that point there was no data held for the whole of England at that point, but changes were due, and I intend to refresh this to get the latest position. But at the point I requested that, there was no sort of centrally held data about numbers of autistic people accessing services. So phase 2 of the project, it has been carried out, and that is in 2 parts. It was maternity, an online questionnaire with maternity services staff in England, and then followed up by interviews. And I'm currently collecting data for phase 2 with autistic women and birthing people at the moment now. So this slide just shows information about the respondents from phase 1. And you can see there's a high proportion of autistic participants, or those who had an autistic family member, and just bearing in mind that some of those may have been in both categories, autistic with also an autistic family member. So just want to talk about just some headline findings from early analysis from the interviews with health professionals. So this is early analysis, really. I'm going to be doing a lot more analysis once I've finished data collection completely, so I'll be able to get into, there'll be much more nuanced information and reporting from that, and comparing and contrasting the 2 phases. But generally, participants stated that the misunderstanding, lack of knowledge and stigma still exists in maternity services. So you can see the link with my earlier postgraduate diploma findings, and that this is still affecting quality of care. The interview participants have significant understanding of autism, and many of them were using this understanding, being approached by other members of staff to support them when they had autistic people coming through services. There was a real drive and passion to make improvements for autistic people, and many participants made suggestions for improvements and mechanisms to actually make those improvements too. There was a requirement for national guidance to support autistic people, to have that sort of standardised guidance, and also a requirement for maternity specific autism training. And some training is now starting to be rolled out, but there was quite a strong steer for actually very specific training around maternity, because there are some issues that impact in a maternity situation that would differ from other parts of the service. So that was considered to be important. Just coming back to the first point there about stigma, I just wanted to pull up that several of the participants talked to me about, in their trust, if somebody disclosed they were autistic, it would immediately raise a flag to follow up with agencies, including social services. So I just wanted to just make that point. So here are some quotes. I'm sorry this is so small, and I'm going to just move this. I just want to just read through some of these quotes from health professionals in phase 1. So one individual was talking about, quoting another member of staff here, and they were told a lot of people lie about having autism because they just want a single room. As I say, that was a participant quoting another member of staff they spoke with. Another respondent said, and this was in the situation where somebody had been an autistic person who was using services, was actually waiting to be induced, and they were told, the quote is, instead of taking the time and actually speaking to the lady and explaining to her what's going on and what's happening, it was just like, let's shove her to the front of the queue so we can get her out. Basically, that was it. And that situation was where the person kept asking lots of questions and needed lots of information. Another quote here, I can't think of any particular occasion that I've heard a midwife be very negative about a woman having autism, but I think I can probably think of many occasions where midwives have expressed frustration or a lack of sympathy or understanding, where women aren't engaging with care or are difficult to communicate with, or have been labelled as difficult because perhaps there's been an outburst, or they've been withdrawn, or whatever that looks like. So but then that hasn't come with a tag attached. It hasn't come with a recognition or an understanding that the woman has a diagnosis of autism. So just thinking about that in the light of late diagnosis and people, the pathways to diagnosis being so long, people coming to that understanding late, clearly there's issues there of being misunderstood. So if these things were kind of known, documented, risk assessed, as it were, and plans put in place, then these women would have much better outcomes. So to me, looking at the big picture in midwifery, there needs to be guidance, guidelines, awareness and risk planning really, and specialist midwives that are able to support women with autism, diagnosed or undiagnosed. Another participant said, ideally, what you would want is a group of midwives, and we have this model for various demographics. You would want a group of midwives who actually specialise in looking after women with autism and caseload them. That's what you'd really want. That would be my ideal. And who can be part of delivering training, etc., and updating guidelines. That would be ideal. Do we have the number of midwives to be able to provide that? I'm not sure we do. So just moving on now to phase 2 of the PhD, which is interviews with autistic people about their experiences. These interviews are still underway, so these are just very early reflections really. So it's far too early to share detailed thoughts. So the autistic participants are really generously sharing their experience and their thoughts. There are experiences of trauma from maternity services. There are experiences of barriers which have led to meltdown and shutdown within either in appointments or in the birth experience or postnatally. There is an example of somebody realising they're autistic specifically because of their experience of maternity services, and wondering why they found that so challenging, and after reflecting and exploring that, finding information about autism and realising that explained their experience for them and subsequently receiving a diagnosis. There are experiences of stigma and people's needs not being met, but there are also experience of these individuals really reflecting and sharing their experiences with a real passion to make it better for other people. And there are some incredibly difficult experiences of care, but some really positive experiences of care too. And there are some experiences that I have identified as sort of proactive kindness, where we have health professionals really taking the time to reflect on individuals' needs and making changes to support that. So I felt like the participants have spent considerable time really thinking about their experiences, trying to get to the heart of what happened for them and why, and we're really keen to explore that further to make change. So I'd like to move on now to talk about heuristic inquiry, which is the approach that I'm using for the research. When I came across this, when exploring different research methodologies, I was so excited. It felt, I felt the glimmer of excitement. I felt an immediate affinity with the approach. It just seemed to fit. So I just want to talk to you a little bit more about that. So the literature describes heuristic inquiry as a flexible approach, and the research question can almost seem to choose the researcher, and it's often deeply personal. The researcher has experience of the phenomenon being explored, and it's used to explore the experiences of that particular topic and to focus and reflect and immerse themselves in it to explore essential meanings to understand the human experience. But whilst it's crucial that the researcher has personally experienced that phenomenon and reflects on this and shares it in the process, it is also transpersonal and requires voices other than the researcher's own to explore the experience more fully and from different perspectives. The researchers really at the fore and at the heart of the qualitative inquiry, and considered to be the key instrument of data collection and interpretation, acknowledging researcher biases, values and attitudes, and also their impact on the research. And it's been described as something that can be really powerful and encompassing for the big events in life. So clearly it fits this topic of having a baby using this maternity services. So for me, as somebody that's used maternity services in England, it seemed like an ideal approach. And it was really important to me to be able to state my positionality. So I just want to talk a little bit more about this and just thinking about my experience and suggesting that it may be a really useful approach as an option for autistic qualitative researchers to use. And I'd like to talk through that and explain why. I've done a scoping review of the literature, and as far as I can see, this hasn't been proposed before. I found a small number of papers where heuristic inquiry has been used for qualitative research with autistic participants, and indeed where one autistic researcher has used heuristic inquiry for autism research and education, but I've found nowhere that's discussed its suitability in this way, particularly for autistic researchers exploring this field, the field of autism. So I've included some referencing here in case you're interested in reading more about this. In my case, as an autistic researcher, my interest in researching something that I've experienced that's affected me deeply, which, as I've explained before, sort of really fits this heuristic inquiry approach. And also, it's also helping to understand others' experiences with a view to make improvements. But I'm also trying to make sense of it for myself. Other autism researchers might be doing something similar in the research projects that they select. So this approach may be suitable for them too. And Throne has proposed this as a suitable approach for qualitative research at doctoral level. And it requires an openness about positionality. This felt important to me. The researcher shares their reflections with the participants, or they're sometimes called co-researchers, to create trust and connectedness. And disclosing the self and the depth and sensitivity of the communication between researcher and co-researcher is really at the heart of heuristics. So I think that making myself quite vulnerable in some ways by sharing some of my experience, I think helped create trust from participants or co-researchers about my reasons and aims for the research. And sharing my personal experiences had an impact on others to say how keen they were to be involved. I think it made it relatable. West talks about how heuristic inquiries can help access material which an outsider would take longer to reach and maybe never reach. And there were high levels of interest from participants. So from the 99 questionnaires that I had, 38 of those respondents wanted to be interviewed, and 18 of those converted to interviews. And it might indicate, in addition to how topical an issue it is, also trust in an autistic researcher doing autism research. I did share my personal story as a short blog article with the Royal College of Midwives when I was recruiting health professionals, so they would have seen some of that information at that point. I think the shared language that autistic people often have between each other can be helpful for effective communication, and it really fits with the double empathy theory, Milton's double empathy theory. And it could reduce the risk of misinterpretation of meaning of the experiences to help ensure that these experiences shared are really understood in the research. And I hope that will add to the quality and richness of the data from those close and personal connections. Processing and describing emotions can sometimes be complicated and delayed for some autistic people, and that's certainly my personal experience. And I've seen that in action in the peer discussion groups that I lead, where a topic is explored and dissected and experience is processed together, which results in a greater depth of understanding. And certainly it's been identified in other areas, such as peer mentoring, which I appreciate isn't the same as research, but where autistic to autistic communication and that shared understanding can be really beneficial. Alexithymia, which has been described as an inability to identify and express one's own emotions, is something that can impact on some autistic people. And whilst it's been identified in recent research as distinct from autism, it can often co-occur. From my personal perspective, it's a regular occurrence to not know exactly how I'm feeling about something in the moment. And this can cause real difficulties for me. I might not process my feelings about situations or events for days, weeks, or even years after they occur. The meaning of that and the impact of that is that, crucially, I sometimes can't respond or react appropriately at the time. And this has a direct impact in many situations for me, as I can't state my feelings and make my thoughts known if I don't know them. And it means that I can't seek appropriate advice or support at the right point. And that was definitely the case in my experience of pregnancy, childbirth, and becoming a new mum. I hope that by sharing that I'm an autistic person who's experienced this, it can also help address some of the power balance between participant and researcher as we're exploring things together. It's also an approach that can be transformative, and that's been described by others that have used a heuristic inquiry. And it can be used to transform self, others, and also systems. There's some participants have told me that they benefited from reflecting on and sharing their experience as part of this research. Personally, the essential self-reflection of heuristic inquiry and hearing others' perspectives really helped me with my processing, as I've described already. It's also given me reassurance that my feelings were valid and often shared, and it's helped with my confidence as a researcher, as although there's been some differences in experiences, as a late diagnosed person who's often been misunderstood or misunderstood others, especially around social or life significant experiences, it felt really important. And the growth in my knowledge has led to increased understanding of the phenomenon and its impact, both mine and in others too. And so there's also the potential for heuristic inquiry to transform and change systems and practice. And there are changes happening in practice. in this field, which I'll talk about when I discuss MARG a little bit later. And it can work really well if it's an area of intense interest, because it's all-consuming and can be completely immersive. And the very flexibility as an approach means that it can be combined with creative outputs too. And Susie Rideau has identified that creative and flexible approaches can be useful in inclusive approaches to embrace diverse communication preferences within autistic people. So just a note of caution, I guess, from this. West talks about the risk of potential danger of collusion. Is it their experience or mine? To mitigate against this, my approach provided interview questions in advance, allowing interviewers to prepare their responses and do some pre-processing throughout the process of interview, if they are online or face-to-face, and clarifying my understanding of responses. Also, transcriptions are being sent to all participants afterwards for the opportunity to correct them, edit them, add further clarity if required. And there's some additional processing time there too, if people may need it. I recognise that there will always be an element of researcher interpretation, but as I say, I'm very open about my positionality here. I also think that some of the experiences that have been shared were so close to mine as an autistic person, it could actually be validating and add weight and credibility to that data. This approach needs to be done with sensitivity and support. Clearly this is an area where there may be triggers for people, and it was crucial for me to be able to signpost appropriate support for participants, but also to identify that for myself. And I had support from supervisors and peers and others. Emotional labour has already been identified for autistic researchers, and this sort of very personal experience and the self-reflection involved when engaging with this field could be further impactful. I thought I was ready for this, and I had expected the interviews with autistic service users could be traumatic and emotional. However, I actually found the interviews with health professionals extremely powerful, and there were some times where I needed to go and play Pokemon Go and watch Downton Abbey reruns after quite a few of them. It was, you know, quite impactful. The interviews so far, interestingly, with autistic service users have although people have had quite difficult experiences that they've shared, they've felt really constructive and same experience. And I felt a really deep connection with the individuals, maybe because they've been in the same boat. Interviews with health professionals made me feel a bit sad, maybe because I felt if only I'd been understood in the way that they were demonstrating that they understood, many of them, the autistic people they supported. I think you also need to be ready as a researcher. You need to have immersed yourself in the phenomenon and processed. And in my case, when I started doing research in this area, it was many years after the experience, so it can take over and be all-consuming. So just some quick reflections. There is potentially an emotional cost of using this service, using this approach, and an emotional benefit. There can be an impact on others and on practice, and it's really important to signpost. There's an opportunity for direct practical change following a personal passion, and it's potentially transformative. So it leads me on nicely to talk about MARG. So who or what is MARG? We're a collective of autistic and neurodivergent individuals who are either researchers or health professionals with an interest in this area. We're multidisciplinary, multi-institutional, all with a real passion for making change for autistic people. All volunteers, giving our time over and above other commitments. I'm really excited that that MARG has come about, and this was from natural contact when sharing about the research. Other people with a research interest in this area got directly in touch to say they were doing similar work. Some of MARG members were already in touch with each other from shared work and research interests, and others didn't know each other. Diane Fox, who is our vice chair, and I had met online, but we met in person at the Royal College of Midwives conference, where we were both presenting, and discussed the possibility of trying to get people together to explore collaborative working. And we had a Zoom meeting with the interested parties, and MARG was a result of that. So I really appreciate the understanding and value of our shared experiences. Please do look at the Autistic Voices section on MARG in the resources page for some of the examples of that. There are some challenges of that. We're all volunteers, we're not funded, we have different working, processing, communication styles and needs in different disciplines. We're from different disciplines, so some of us were strangers, some knew each other, but that passion to make change is really important. So I think we've been trying to support each other with compassion and kindness, and allowing people to dip out when things have become too much. So so far we've developed a website. Diane Fox was instrumental in developing this with support from ACER from Autistic Parents UK. We have a social media and communications manager, Hayley Morgan, and Stacey George Hims as our secretary. We've established some subgroups, so we have a steering group to help shape our strategic direction. We have a health professionals group looking at practice led by Diane Fox. We have a research group led by Dr. Amy Grant, and we've so far developed criteria for a research sharing framework, and we're using that to review research before we host it on our website, and to create a paragraph highlighting the outcomes of our review process. There have been some delays with getting some of the information on the website, but please keep coming back and looking as it's all underway. We've had a launch party and the videos on the website and with presentations from some of the team members. Please have a look at that for more detail. And Willow Holloway from Autistic UK really helped us with that. So thank you for that, Willow. We've been in contact with a range of organisations and working with many to help input into policy and practice. We're doing some training and we're speaking at conferences. So we've been working with the Royal College of Midwives, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists, several NHS trusts, Autistic Parents UK, Autistic UK, the National Autistic Society, SANS, the Breastfeeding Alliance, Maternity Consortium, the Neurodiversity Birth Podcast, Baby Lifeline, Maternal Mental Health Alliance and London Maternity Services, and also the Iolanthe Trust. We also spoke at the Intersectional Midwife Conference as well, and we've been talking to the Association of South Asian Midwives to understand how we can be more inclusive and reflecting on that intersectionality. So our network is really expanding because of the nature of the work and research we do as individuals and collectively. Things have happened really quickly. We're trying to be realistic about what we can achieve to keep it sustainable and manageable, taking into account individual well-being and taking small steps to consolidate now and manage the workload. So we will continue to add research. We're planning future events. We have a newsletter underway, lots of resources still to add to the website, which will be an ongoing activity. And thinking about how we manage our structure and how we work with allies and subscribers going forward. So it's all to be, some of those things are to be determined, but we've come far so quickly. So please do have a look at the website and keep an eye out for some of those things and subscribe to the newsletter. And what I hope we can do is help amplify each other's voices and work and support signposting of good quality neuro-affirming research and resources. So these are the items that are on the website. So do have a look at that. Look at the Meet the Teams page as well to see what the MARG members are working on. I just want to take this opportunity to highlight some really important resources that have been developed. They're not MARG specific initiatives, but have been developed by some of the MARG team. But Dr. Amy Grant has some resources called Autistic Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, Your Questions Answered. There's it's a suite of over 100 videos that are now available on the Autism from Menstruation to Menopause YouTube channel, and there'll be more added as they go along. All of that content was created by autistic people, and some of the MARG team were involved in developing that and are in the videos. There's also a book due out soon, which MARG members Hayley Morgan and Karen Henry have co-authored, also with Emma Derman, called Supporting Autistic People Through Pregnancy and Childbirth. So that's due out in January, so have a look out for that too. There are other books and resources on the website though, so please look through that. Just some final reflections. there's a real need for change in maternity services to support autistic people. The change is necessary and it is coming, and it's being driven by autistic people, researchers, health professionals and allies working in this area. Autistic voices are crucial in this, and the body of literature is growing. The Heuristic Inquiry as a research approach may be particularly suitable for some qualitative autism researchers, just from the benefits I've outlined. And also just to say that autistic people working together with allies and with a shared understanding can just be so incredibly powerful. So I've added some references here, and I'd be really happy to take questions.
I know, Sara, we do have questions for you. But before I do, that whole idea about how powerful your work is, it's true. I've known you for some time. Thank you. It's such a delight to hear from you again. For those of you who don't know Sara well, she's one of my go-to people when I need wisdom. And what you've actually talked about today is that deep wisdom, born of vulnerability and experience, transmuted into an open and generous act of research. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording at this point before we go into questions, so we've got more flexibility to speak. I've also got a request that actually Sara sometimes likes a bit of processing time, so we'll make sure that if you want to continue some of these conversations, Sara, is it still okay to put your email in the text, the chat?
It is, and I've just put the contact details here, and also if anyone would like to, there's the website there, the email address, and if anyone would like to cite any of the content from today, I've just put a citation there too, so feel free to do that.
Excellent. I have now stopped